Hey guys, I'm excited to do another tier video, ranking video. I really feel like this is like my I was gonna say safe space. That's not exactly what I was looking for. This is like my element. Like I love doing these videos. They're a lot of fun. I'm glad you guys have been enjoying them as well. This was sort of requested. This person at Nay Johnson FC3NF said that I should rank the zodiac signs from least to most intelligent, which I have thought about that. That is definitely something I've kind of played around with and thought about. I do think that's a fun idea, but the issue with that though is that each sign does have their own kind of intelligence. Each sign I think is equally conscious, just in different ways. So I am just kind of doing a slight spin on that. I'm going to rank the most analytical signs. We've narrowed it down to a certain kind of intelligence. I think this is sort of what people usually mean, when they think of intelligence. We're talking about kind of like book smart, brainy, cerebral, that's more what we will be talking about here. Who is the most analytical, thinking, analyzing, learning, etc. So yeah, and as always, if you are interested in getting a reading from me, if you have any kind of questions, definitely let me know. Email me, check out my website, etc. All of that information is always in the description. I really appreciate you, those of you who have supported the channel. You can also donate as well if you'd like to, but doing so allows me to post content like this. And I really appreciate it because I have been struggling this year, and I'm planning on moving across the country maybe very soon. But anyway, let's kind of go through the zodiac as usual in alphabetical order and rank the most analytical signs. So we start out with Aquarius. This is definitely one of the more analytical signs. Something that it's only a matter of time before I talk about in this video, and I've mentioned this in other videos as well, is that some signs are symbolized as people and other signs are symbolized as animals. And it's generally very consistent that all the animalistic signs are not so analytical. They don't analyze just for the sake of analyzing. Some of them can do it, but that's just not, they're more instinctual, they're more emotional kind of. But the signs that are ruled by, they're symbolized by people, such as Aquarius. Aquarius is the water bearer. You could argue that, that would be referring to the vessel itself, like the vase. But generally it's always a person holding the vase, usually a man. So I really think it's a person. Aquarius is all about humanity and things like that. So all the signs symbolized as people are analytical. They do analyze just for the sake of analyzing. That's why they tend to be chatty. Even Virgo, we'll talk about later. Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but even the more introverted human signs are still very analytical. They can get chatty. So anyway, this is a human sign. Definitely very analytical. This is an air sign. Air signs are brainy, cerebral, very mentally oriented. Aquarius is fixed air, so I've noticed many Aquariuses, once they start talking, they can just go and go and go. They've got that, stamina, being a fixed sign. I do think, though, that there is this kind of animalistic side to Aquarius. I do definitely think they're more cerebral and mentally oriented than, otherwise. But I do think they can be surprisingly in touch with their instincts as well. So I'm going to say more, definitely on the more side. I don't know. And these are always subject to change as well. But I don't know. They definitely are one of the most analytical signs, but something kind of keeps me from putting them in the most analytical category. That's tough though. I'm really debating it. I'm gonna leave them there for now. They're definitely very analytical, but I do think there are a couple signs that are a little bit more, even more analytical. Aquarius, I think part of it is just being a fixed sign. I think if you're a fixed sign, you're more oriented toward things being the same. And if things are the same, I think there's less of a need to constantly analyze everything. I think the signs more conducive toward, change, that are centered around change. I think those are the ones that really take the analyzing to another level. Let's talk about Aries. So Aries can be chatty because of their energy. They're so energized. But the difference, though, is that I think Aries is more likely to, communicate with a purpose or with an intention, rather than just communicating just for the sake of communicating or analyzing just for the sake of analyzing. Aries can be very open to information. They can be excellent students sometimes. But another thing is that Aries is much more physically oriented, and they're much more about the now. Like, what can we do in the immediate moment? Like, they don't, generally speaking, of course, we have to take into account everyone's placements. But generally speaking, if you have a lot of Aries placements, you're not going to be satisfied just sitting in a room, like, thinking and imagining and, learning about some, theoretical concept. Aries wants to do things in the immediate moment. That's where they really shine, generally speaking. So Aries, this is a very athletic sign. It's a very charismatic sign, very physically oriented. So I would say this is one of the least analytical signs. I'm going to put them in the least category for now. This is harder than I thought it would be. I know which signs are more or less analytical, but when it comes to ranking the specific tiers, that's where I'm kind of actually struggling a little bit. But for now, we'll put them in the least category. It is interesting, though, if you mix, like, let's say someone has major Aries placements, but they've also got, some air or other analytical energy in their charts, then, mixing the energy of Aries with some, intellectual or analytical energy, they can be hyper, fixated on learning, and Aries can have that very intellectual side to them. But again, generally speaking, though, much more physically oriented, much more focused on the immediate moment. Yeah, I don't know. There's potential there, but I think it's one of the least analytical. I almost want to put them one tier up, but we're going to leave them there for now. Next is Cancer. So this one's a little tricky as well. Cancer is definitely more of a feeler than a thinker, right? Some signs are both. What I've learned and kind of been thinking about recently, though, because I know many people who have major Cancer placements. I don't really myself, but I've it's one of the signs that I've been attracted to for whatever reason. But what I've noticed, though, is that Cancers have a really vivid inner world. So they are thinking a lot. They're feeling a lot. Cancer, though, I think is one of the least communicative signs. They do think a lot, but they're not so much focused on communicating all that. So in a way, that kind of fits because Cancer is symbolized as a crab, which is an animal. Animals think too. It's just that they don't talk. You know what I mean? I had that revelation with this guy that all of his placements are animal signs. And, I was realizing it's not that he doesn't think or analyze. He does analyze a lot. It's just that he's not he's not oriented towards speaking about this constant analysis. So that's really what I think of with Cancer. Cancer, yeah, it does have that rich inner world. They can be analytical, and again, it's kind of like with Aries. If you mix Cancer with some intellectual energy, they can be very analytical because they have that deep emotion. They can combine that deep emotion with that deep intellect. But generally speaking, I think Cancer just has other intelligences that they use. Like Cancer is more emotionally intelligent. They really use their intuition, which honestly, I think many people get sensitive about that. People don't want to be told that, oh, you're so emotional, because that implies that they're irrational. But I don't think that's the case. I don't make that implication. If anything, I think using intuition is actually superior to analytical ability, because I myself am a more analytical person. Obviously, that's what I do in all these videos. That's my kind of go-to. But I think where intuition is superior to analytical ability is that intuition is immediate. You just know things. You don't have to wait and observe and see patterns, and you don't have to use that mental, energy. It takes a lot of energy to run a brain that's, analyzing and thinking. Of course, there are different pitfalls and different pros and cons of each intelligence, but I do think intuition is superior to analytical ability in many ways. So Cancer is not as analytical. They're more intuitive. They can sometimes enjoy, it's a very thoughtful sign. So I do think they can be very reflective, but they're not going to like analyzing just for the sake of analyzing. I think that will become, they're going to get burnt out with that type of thing. So I would say Cancer would be the least analytical as well. It's tough though, because I can see a side of each of those signs that could have potential being analytical, but we'll see where all the other signs lay. I may have to adjust this later. Next is Capricorn. So I didn't think. Now I'm kind of running these like different filters through my mind. I think it really does matter. Is each sign more focused on the present? Are they focused on the future? Because if you're focused on the present, again, there's not as much need to analyze. But focusing on the future, I do think that will make a sign more analytical. Capricorn is very much focused on the future, so they really thrive when it comes to strategy and planning. So I do think there's some kind of analytical ability and senses involved and all that. But on the other hand, Capricorn is an animalistic sign. It's symbolized as the goat or the goat fish, the goat serpent, whatever that strange creature is. So it is an animalistic sign. And something that's interesting is Capricorn is very detached, and so I think one would think, oh, they're an Earth sign, they're so practical, so logical. They are more detached. So you would think, oh, they must be super intellectual, super analytical, but that's actually not necessarily the case. I do think Capricorn actually, they are very practical, but I think that practicality actually comes from a place of instinct and intuition rather than like logical analysis, which I know is tricky. Yes, they are very logical. But again, this is another sign that they're not going to enjoy just analyzing just for the sake of analyzing. Everything is more intentional with them. So I would say average, probably. They definitely are. Out of all the animalistic signs, I think Capricorn is more analytical. But compared to like all the signs as a whole, I do see them being less analytical. Maybe I'll put them in the less category. Next is Gemini. So I'm going to put Gemini in the most analytical category. Again, like, it's funny. This whole video is funny because I'm analyzing what signs are most analytical. This is all I do on this channel. This is what I do all the time. I'm constantly analyzing everything. That's where I shine. That's a strength, but it also comes with downsides. But I could do this all day. Like, this is just second nature to me. But anyway, what I'm getting at is I have major Gemini placements. Like, this analyzing that you're hearing now, this is Gemini. I have other placements as well that we could talk about later. But anyway, let's not talk about me too much though. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. They are constantly analyzing. They're very open, to new information. But they will analyze anything just for the sake of analyzing. Like, it doesn't even have to be, there doesn't have to be any point to it necessarily. Like, they just have fun analyzing. They are one of those signs that likes talking. I have noticed though, the most shy, quiet people I've ever met have all been air sun signs easily. So there is this range there, when it comes to talking, which is similar to analyzing. Gemini can be extremely shy. They can also be very talkative. If you get them comfortable to share their thoughts with you, you'll realize they have a very busy mind. So very analytical, very chatty, very talkative, potentially. They're constantly thinking. Gemini is one of those signs as well that, like, they can enjoy really deep conversations. They can also enjoy certain very shallow conversations as well. They can be crude. They enjoy the entire range. Like, what is that saying about, I don't remember exactly what it is. I'm going to butcher this. But, like, shallow people talk about people, and then more intelligent people talk about events, and then the most intelligent people talk about concepts or something like that, ideas. Gemini wants to talk about all of it. You know what I mean? They don't care. They want all of it. They want all the information, whether it's shallow and petty or deep and profound. They want all of it. So yeah, they are, king of analyzing, I guess. Next is Leo. Leo's fixed fire. So I really think they're actually less analytical than even the other fire signs. I think this has been a source of contention for certain people, especially those that have Leo placements, because I understand, like, whatever placements you have in Leo, you feel like those are the best, and you're not wrong necessarily. I understand that, like, the placements I have in Leo, I feel like I'm the best in that area. Leo, that's where Leo shines. They feel like they're the best. But there's this whole thing about, and I don't know, I haven't been in tune to the astrological community in years, so this may have changed. But when I was still involved, with these communities and things, modern astrologers were trying to say that Aquarius is the sign of exaltation for Mercury, which I don't believe that. But the whole contention with Leo is that if Mercury is exalted in Aquarius, that means that Mercury would be in fall in Leo. And, I understand how many people were confused. Many people have mixed feelings about that. And again, I don't subscribe to that idea. But at the same time, like, I could see. I don't think Mercury is exalted in Aquarius. I don't think it's in fall in Leo. But I could see how you could make that argument. Because Leo being fixed fire, like, there's no need to analyze everything. Like, Leo is the energy of, like, let's just chill out, let's have fun, let's have a great time. I feel like that's kind of antithetical to analysis. If you're analyzing, that means that there's some kind of improvement to be made or some kind of problem to be solved. And Leo, I think they're just so optimistic. I don't think they have that outlook. That being said, though, it's another one of those signs where if you mix Leo with the right signs, Leo's openness can make them excellent at learning and obtaining new information. But generally speaking, though, Leo is also one of those signs that's more physically oriented, like Aries. So Leo's going to be more, I don't know, more just in the moment, I think, more spontaneous. I think Leo is less analytical even than Aries or Cancer. So I might have to bump these up, I think. Whoops, I just took that. Let's bump these up real quick. Yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you think. I know I've got some people that regularly tune in and comment that have major Leo placements. Do you feel like Leo is analytical? Yeah, or really any of these rankings. I'd be curious y'all's thoughts. Next, let's talk about Libra. Libra is one of the most analytical signs easily. Let's go back to this whole people and animals concept. So Libra is particularly interesting because Libra is the only sign that is not symbolized as a person or an animal. It's actually symbolized as an object. It is literally the scales. So it's different than Aquarius. It's not the person holding the scales that we're talking about. It's literally Libra, the scales. It's an inanimate object. And that really says a lot. That's why I argue that Libra is actually the least emotional sign, even though Libra can seem, Libra is so emotionally intelligent, I guess. Libra is very aware of emotions, but at the same time, I think they're the most detached, having that symbology of the scales, they aren't what they're weighing. They are the scales themselves. Like, they are the mechanism. And that's kind of the beauty of Libra, because they are almost like completely dissociated from themselves. And so that allows them to be objective and impartial and just completely, weigh two different concepts or weigh the information. Libra's another sign, I think Libra has a lot in common with Gemini, where they're constantly analyzing. They're constantly saying, there's pros and cons to everything. They can, it's almost scary how, like, I think Libra and Gemini can rationalize even situations and decisions that are very irrational. They can see every side to things, so that even something that's kind of silly or stupid, they can drum up some kind of reasoning to make it make sense. Like, this is an excellent kind of lawyer type of sign, if that makes sense. They can argue any point, even if it's ridiculous. So I would say that I think Libra is even more analytical than Aquarius. I think they're one of the most analytical signs. They're another sign that will analyze just for the sake of analyzing. They like talking and weighing the different pros and cons. Libra can struggle with, acting. They're not so physically oriented. They can get lost in the analysis. It can become maybe too much of a good thing. Kind of, again, similar to Gemini. Let's talk about Pisces. So Pisces is, I'm gonna say they're the least analytical, which is interesting because all the mutable signs are intellectual and analytical and either symbolized as a human, or we'll talk about Sagittarius, how they are half human, being a centaur. But Pisces is the only non-intellectual, non-analytical mutable sign, which I think is very interesting because, there must be something similar. Obviously Pisces being another mutable sign. Someone is actually just kind of telling me about this in a way, how, he's Pisces moon, and it's like it is a similar process to analysis, but it's more emotional though, since Pisces is mutable water. rather than, breaking everything down and observing and learning through information and analysis. I think Pisces does something similar, but it's more about emotion and intuition. So it's very similar, but it's also fundamentally different. But I think that difference actually, this is really difficult for me. I think that difference actually, in a weird way, alienates them from the more intellectual signs, even though it is kind of similar on some level. Pisces is just so focused on vibes and intuition and emotion. I think Pisces has a really hard time with like analysis and things of like details and detailed information and things like that. Like Pisces is going to gloss over all of that. I think they can get into a specific like vibe or feeling much more. But yeah, another thing too, I do think the more optimistic signs will generally be less analytical, because if everything's going well and everything's just great, then why are you overthinking? You know what I mean? Overthinking implies you're looking for improvement, you're finding greater efficiency, and Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, so it is a warm, optimistic sign. I think it's kind of a carefree, kind of like a hippie sign, I always say. So yeah, I would say less analytical, even more so than Aries or Cancer. Next is Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is interesting because they are a fire sign. They're very physically oriented, which, fire signs are generally not so analytical. They're more just in the moment, more physical. But Sagittarius is mutable, and it's symbolized as the centaur. So they are the only sign that is half human, half animal. They can do all of it. That's why I love Sagittarius. They're so versatile. They can be very instinctual, and they can let their emotions, get the best of them. They can be extremely intuitive, but then they also have that analytical ability as well. They can, chat just for the sake of chatting, analyze just for the sake of analyzing. So really they have a lot on their plate. I think that's the beauty, but also the potential downfall of Sagittarius. How do you manage all of that? It's really great to have all those different kinds of intelligences, but how do you manage that? So anyway, I think it's an interesting sign because of that. So I would definitely, this one I'm very confident about. They are definitely on the more analytical side of things, but not as much as Gemini or Libra. Because again, they have that animalistic side, they have that instinctual side, and Sagittarius is, I feel, they tend to be very emotional, they tend to be very passionate. So we'll put them on the more side for now. Next is Scorpio. This is another interesting one because Scorpio is symbolized as an animal, scorpion, obviously. And plus it's a water sign. They're very emotional, very passionate. They're clearly a sign that is more of a feeler than a thinker, very intuitive, but at the same time they are thinkers as well, though. They are very analytical, very intellectual. So I would say of the signs that are symbolized as animals, I think Scorpio is the most analytical, because they have such a survival mentality. They have such a like hyper awareness and I think that's, in a weird way, it's kind of similar to Sagittarius. Even though those signs are very different, both are, deeply, they're deep feelers and deep thinkers. I do think both Scorpio and Sagittarius are slightly more on the feeling side, maybe. I'm not as sure about Sagittarius. But anyway, Scorpio can kind of do it all. I think if they had to choose, they'd probably go to that emotion and intuition first. That's probably their more comfortable function, I guess you could say, kind of like Myers-Briggs. But again, they can keep up with the analytical signs, though, in that department. So I'm going to say more in the more category for sure. But this makes me kind of wonder, though, because Aquarius is definitely more analytical than, well, maybe not. I don't know. We'll leave them here. I kind of like how we've got one of 3 different elements in this category, so that's fun. Anyway, next is Taurus. I really think, Taurus, as usual, Taurus has a lot in common with Capricorn. It's an earth sign. And Taurus is one of those signs as well, like Capricorn, that, I think because they're so practical, so logical, that makes it sound like, you'd expect them to be analytical or very intellectual. But again, I would argue that practicality comes from a place of instinct. They will use logic to back up their decisions and their thinking. But I really think it comes from a place of instinct, though. Taurus is symbolized as an animal. It's the bull. I almost said cow. You could say cow too. It is more instinctual, right? So yeah, just because you're practical, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're analytical. With that being said, I think I'd rank Taurus kind of in the middle. I don't know, maybe less. This is tough. I don't know. I do think Taurus is a sign that would become overwhelmed and flustered if you are just constantly chatting and yammering away, constantly analyzing everything. Like, Taurus can analyze things that need to be analyzed. You know what I mean? Like, it's more of just a means to an end rather than just like what I'm doing here. I'm just analyzing just for fun, or just, as a pastime, as a job or whatever. I don't feel that with Taurus. I guess I'll leave them with Capricorn. This ranking may not be perfect as usual, but I do think Capricorn would be slightly more analytical just because they are more focused on the future and strategy and things like that. I think Taurus is more kind of in the moment, I guess you could say. But we'll let them hang out in the same tier though. And lastly is Virgo, and I've done different, as you probably know, I do polls on my channel. I've done polls of, ranking the most intelligent sign, which consistently Virgo, Gemini, Aquarius, and I think Scorpio are ranked as most intelligent, as well as most misunderstood and least liked, by the way. Coincidence? I think not. But anyway, Virgo, recently though, another poll I did was the most analytical sign, and Virgo won by a landslide. I think Gemini was second. But yeah, Virgo's another sign that I've really noticed over the past couple of years, that Virgo, when you first meet a Virgo, they come across a little standoffish. I think it's because they aren't comfortable being emotionally vulnerable, and they're also very adaptable, so they're not one to initiate usually. They're more kind of like observing, and they're wanting to adapt to you, even though it doesn't seem like it because they come across standoffish. I think Virgo tends to be a little shy as well. But what I've noticed, and maybe this is just me, but once you just start kind of talking, and if you kind of open up to a Virgo first, they'll open up very easily, and they are chatters. They like chatting. They can come across very quiet, shy, reserved at first, even like cold maybe. But get them comfortable, they will talk for hours. But the reason why I'm saying that, of course, is because that talking for hours, it's analyzing. Virgo will analyze just for the sake of analyzing. They are, masters. That's what they do. That's what they're there for. So yeah, that's how I would rank this. This is very nicely even. I didn't anticipate that, so I'm definitely gonna lock in these answers. But yeah, clearly, the more, these are all analytical. They're all human symbolized, other than Scorpio. But yeah, kind of interesting, I guess, as we might expect, the fire and water signs tend to be toward the bottom, other than Sagittarius and Scorpio. For some reason, I guess fall is just a very intellectual season. With Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, all of those are somewhat analytical. It's such a refined, like, complex energy that I think fall is in the northern hemisphere. So, but yeah, we've got these, like, spring and summer fire water signs being least analytical. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I think this is more just for fun. I don't know if you actually learned anything, but that's okay. I like doing fun videos. Let me know if you agree with my rankings or not. It's definitely a conversation. None of this is set in stone. You could argue that this sign or that sign might be one tier up or down, what have you. But yeah, I love those conversations and that analyzing, as you know. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next video.